The wind howled like a living thing across the frozen plains of northern Minnesota, tearing at trees, sweeping over ditches, and swallowing up all sounds except the crunch of snow beneath small, determined feet. In the midst of that desolate landscape, a lone figure moved slowly down an old logging road, her face nearly hidden beneath the oversized hood of a coat not thick enough for the biting cold. Her name was Clara Whitmore, 14 years old, 5 feet tall, and no heavier than a stack of firewood. She wore worn sneakers wrapped in plastic bags, a school backpack filled with mismatched clothes, and a flannel shirt under a thin parka with a broken zipper. Her mittens were mismatched, one knit and one leather. Her fingers were already going numb. She had started walking before dawn, slipping out the back door of the trailer she called home, careful not to wake Dale, her stepfather. Her mother had died 8 months earlier. The coroner said heart failure. Clara didn't believe it. Since then, Dale had become something else entirely, unpredictable, explosive, and cruel. His eyes had a glassy vacancy when he drank, and he drank often. After last night, Clara knew she couldn't stay. He'd come into her room without knocking. He didn't touch her, but he stared far too long, breathing heavily, reeking of beer and something sour. That was enough. Clara waited until he passed out on the couch. Then she left. She didn't know the way to her grandmother's house exactly. Her mother hadn't spoken to Marjorie Whitmore in over a decade, only once mentioning a farm near Birch Hollow, 30 miles west of their small town of Red Hollow. Clara had found the name in an old letter buried in a box of forgotten things. The letter was from Marjorie, begging her daughter to leave Dale and bring Clara to her. It was never mailed. Clara had kept it, hidden between the pages of a Nancy Drew book. So now she walked and walked through knee-deep snowdrifts and along icy ditches, past shuttered barns and forgotten mailboxes. The clouds hung low and gray, promising more snow. The only map she had was torn from an outdated phone book, barely legible, with half the roads erased or renamed over the years. With every step, her resolve hardened. Her legs ached, her lips were cracked and bleeding. But she wouldn't stop. She couldn't. There was nothing behind her but darkness, and in front of her, a sliver of hope, even if that hope was a woman she had never met. Clara remembered stories her mother used to tell her back when life was normal. Her mom would light candles during storms and tell her tales of northern women walking barefoot through snow to save their children. Clara never believed them. Now, she was living one. As the hours dragged on, the cold worked its way deeper into her bones. Her toes stung, then went numb. Her hands burned with frostnip. She tried to stay positive, counting steps, whispering to herself, 1, 2, 3, you're not weak, you're wild and free. She made up little chants, silly rhymes, anything to keep her mind occupied. Her stomach rumbled. The only food she had was a frozen peanut butter sandwich and a half-eaten granola bar. She rationed sips of water from a cracked thermos that leaked when tilted. No cars passed. No houses had smoke rising from the chimneys. This road had been abandoned years ago, forgotten like so many things in this part of the country. It twisted through dying forests and across iced creeks, narrowing into deer paths in places. Her breath came in sharp, steaming puffs. Round midday, she saw a mailbox half buried in snow. The name was scratched out beyond it. A dilapidated barn leaned to one side like it was about to fall. She stopped there for a break, sitting behind the windbreak of the barn's rusted frame. She pulled off her shoe to check her toes, purple at the tips. She didn't panic. Not yet. She reached into her bag and pulled out the letter again. Her hands trembled, not just from the cold. If you ever need me, come. Don't let that man raise our Clara. I'll be waiting in Birch Hollow. You always have a home. With me. Love. Mom. Clara folded it back up. Even if her grandmother didn't want her now, Clara would at least be free. Free from the way Dale's footsteps made her heart race. Free from the smell of smoke and whiskey. Free from pretending everything was okay when it was in single quotes T. By the time the sun dipped low in the sky, Clara had walked at least 10 miles, maybe more. The cold was turning dangerous now. The wind cut sharper. Snow began to fall again, thick and relentless. She tried to keep moving, but her legs started to tremble. Her ankle twisted when she stepped into a hidden ditch. She cried out but kept going. Then she heard something, a branch breaking, a snap. She looked around. No animals, no trees near enough to make that sound. Just wind. She pushed on. She had to, even if it killed her, because what waited back home already had. By nightfall, Clara was barely moving. Her vision blurred. Shapes danced at the edges of her eyes. She thought she saw someone standing just beyond the trees, a tall figure, unmoving, watching. But when she turned her head, the shape was gone. Just snow, just wind, still, she whispered. Please someone help me, and the woods answered. The world had lost all color. White sky, white ground, white flakes spiraling in every direction. Time no longer passed in hours, but in footsteps uneven and slow, somewhere beyond the wind. The sun had vanished, swallowed by thick, leaden clouds. The light that remained was eerie and diffuse, casting no shadows, creating the illusion that Clara was walking through a snow globe that someone had shaken, just to watch her suffer. Her mind had begun to dull. The cold did that like a thief. First, it stole sensation from her fingers, then her toes. Next, it took her sense of time. Then came her memories, scattered like leaves. She kept forgetting what direction she was walking. West, no, south. The road had disappeared hours ago. Beneath the drifts, all she could see was forest and snow. She had crossed a shallow stream earlier. The ice had broken under one foot, and now that sneaker was soaked through. Her sock had frozen stiff inside it, her foot numb from heel to toe. The bags she'd wrapped around her shoes offered no more protection than paper. Her left hand was bare now. She had lost one mitten when she stumbled in the brush and didn't have the strength to go back for it as she tried to speak to herself, tried to keep her mind awake with nursery rhymes and made-up songs. But her voice cracked and faded. Free. Birds fly, she muttered, and girls like me. We silenced. The wind swallowed her voice whole. It was as if the forest had never heard her. She stopped to rest against the trunk of a crooked birch tree, its bark peeling like old paint. She closed her eyes for just a second just to listen to the wind. And that's when it began. A whisper. At first, Clara thought it was just a trick of the storm. She leaned closer to the bark. Then again faint, fleeting. Clara, her name, spoken like wind through a broken window, soft, impossible. Clara snapped her eyes open and looked around. There was no one, just trees, snow, the endless white. Hush. She shook her head. She must be imagining it. Hypothermia could cause confusion, hallucinations. She'd read that in a science magazine in school. She was cold, she was tired. Her mind was playing tricks, but then she heard it again. Clara. Only this time, it was closer. She turned. Nothing. No footprints but her own. No movement except the restless swirl of snowflakes. She staggered forward, this time faster. Fear had begun to claw through the numbness. The whisper followed. Not constant, intermittent, never quite repeating, just enough to keep her turning, doubting, glancing behind. It was as if the trees themselves were breathing her name, calling her deeper into the woods. She tried plugging her ears, but her bare hand was too cold to move properly. Her limbs were growing sluggish. Her body was beginning to slow down. Just keep walking, she whispered. Just keep walking. But her legs buckled. She landed, hard on her side, sinking into the snow. It was soft at first, like a bed. She wanted to rest. Her head drooped, her eyelids fluttered shut. She felt warm, so peaceful. And then a shadow, something loomed overhead. Her eyes opened. Halfway, a dark shape stood above her, tall and narrow, unmoving, a face hidden beneath a wide-brimmed hat, like an old ranger's hat. For one long moment, the shape didn't move. Then, it extended an arm. A hand reached down toward her. Clara blinked. She couldn't tell if the man was real. Her mind couldn't focus. All she knew was the fingers were bare and pale and they weren't shaking. Clara, the man said gently, I've got you. You're safe now. Safe. Was she dreaming? Was this death? The man knelt beside her. He smelled like pine wood and snowmelt. His voice was deep and calm. But there was something else in it, something old, like the way her mother used to read stories. My name's Emery, he said. You're freezing. Can you hear me? Clara tried to nod, but her head barely moved. He gently lifted her into his arms, wrapping her in a thick wool coat. The warmth was immediate and overwhelming. Her last conscious thought before fading was, how did he know my name? When she awoke again, she was no longer in the snow. She was in a small room, dimly lit, warm. Her wet clothes were gone. She wore an oversized sweater and lay on a couch near a flickering fire. Heavy curtains covered the windows. The walls were log and stone, the furniture old-fashioned and rustic. Mounted animal heads stared blankly from above the fireplace. There was no sound except the occasional crackle of burning logs. Clara sat up slowly. Her body ached, her ankle throbbed, but she was alive. The man appeared from a side room carrying a steaming mug. You're awake, he said, smiling. That's good. Here, drink this. She hesitated. It's just tea, chamomile. He added, "You've had a rough time." She accepted the mug. Her hands trembled so badly he had to help her hold it. The tea was bitter and fragrant. It warmed her from the inside out. "My name's Emery," he repeated. "Used to be a park ranger round these woods. Now I just to keep to myself. Found you out there near Devil's Hollow. Lucky I was out walking. Most folks don't come this far in the winter." He watched her closely, but kindly. Clara nodded. Her voice was hoarse when she spoke. How did you know my name?" He didn't blink. "You said it right before you passed out. You kept repeating it." She wasn't sure if that was true. It didn't feel true. "Where am I?" she asked. "About 10 miles from Birch Hollow, middle of nowhere." "Really? You're safe here?" Clara looked around. The cabin was strange, not messy, but too neat, like someone had been waiting for a guest. And then, through the firelight she saw it. A photograph on the mantel, a girl, blonde, freckled, about Clara's age. Her face was scratched out. Clara lay on the faded plaid couch wrapped in a heavy wool blanket, staring at the fire as it snapped and whispered. Every now and then, a log shifted and popped, sending a flurry of sparks up the chimney. Her hands still trembled. Her skin was raw from cold and frostbite, but warmth had returned slowly, painfully. She kept her gaze on the fire. It was safer than looking at the man across the room. Emery. That was what he'd said his name was. He moved like someone used to silence. His footsteps didn't creak, and his voice came soft, deliberate. He wore old flannel shirts with elbow patches and spoke in a careful, measured way, like someone who'd learned long ago not to scare wild animals or people. He sat now in a chair across from her, sipping from a mug of something dark. The chair creaked beneath him, the only sound beside the fire. Clara finally asked the question she'd been holding onto. "Why were you out in the storm?" He looked up, meeting her eyes. His were a pale blue, washed out, like river ice. "I go walking most evenings," he said. "Storm or not. Been here long enough to know the land." "You said you used to be a ranger." He nodded. "Long time ago, before this land got bought up by the state. I stayed behind when they moved the stations. Couldn't bring myself to leave." She didn't know what to say to that. She sipped the last of her tea. Her lips were cracked and bleeding, and the cup trembled in her hand. Mr. Emery stood and took it from her gently. "You should rest. You've been through hell." Clara nodded, but she didn't close her eyes. Not yet. He turned toward the kitchen, disappearing behind a curtain that hung instead of a door. His footsteps faded. She scanned the room again. The cabin was cozy in an unnatural way. Everything looked carefully placed. Antique snowshoes mounted over the door. Jars of dried herbs lined neatly on a shelf. An old record player in the corner. But it wasn't lived in. It felt staged, like a museum of someone else's life. And then her eyes returned to the photograph. It was still there on the mantel. A girl, maybe a little younger than Clara. Blonde hair and pigtails, a green sweater. Except her face had been violently scratched out with something sharp. Deep gouges ran across the glass. Clara stood, her ankle aching, and limped closer to inspect it. She reached for the frame. "I wouldn't touch that," Mr. Emery said softly. Clara jumped. She hadn't heard him come back. He was behind her now, his voice low and level. "That was my daughter," he said. "Emily, I'm sorry," Clara murmured. "She died," he said. "Long time ago. Winter took her. Same way it nearly took you." She wanted to ask what happened. She wanted to ask why the picture was destroyed if she loved her daughter. But the words caught in her throat. "She used to sit where you're sitting," he added. "Wore sweaters like that. Said they made her look like a Christmas elf." His face softened for a moment. Then he turned back toward the kitchen. "I'll fix some soup," he said. "Rabbit, you hungry?" Clara didn't answer. She was too busy watching the way he moved. There was no limp, no hesitation. Even when he bent to stir the pot, he moved with precision, like someone rehearsing. She sat down slowly. Her heart was starting to beat harder. The fireplace crackled. The wind howled outside. Mr. Emery hummed softly a tuneless melody. Almost like a lullaby. She looked around the room again. No phone, no radio, no clock. The windows were shuttered. No light came in from outside. She couldn't even tell if it was still day or night. "How far is Birch Hollow?" she asked. "Too far to walk in this weather," he said without turning. "Roads are iced in. No plows come out this far. You'll stay here until the storm clears." Clara swallowed. "How long will that be?" "As long as it takes." She didn't like the way he said it. She didn't like it at all. Later, after soup and awkward silence, Clara asked to use the bathroom. Mr. Emery pointed down a narrow hallway. "It's the second door," he said. First one stays shut. She nodded, limped down the hall, and past the first door. It was closed, locked, heavy bolts lined the frame. Why lock a door inside your own house? She used the bathroom quickly, afraid to linger. When she emerged, she paused at the door again. She placed her ear against it. Nothing. She was about to walk away when she heard a click, faint, sharp, like something unlocking. She pressed her ear closer. This time, she heard something else. Breathing, shallow, slow, like someone or something was on the other side, waiting. She backed away fast. When she returned to the main room, Mr. Emery was back in his chair, staring at the fire. He didn't look up when he spoke. You went quiet down the hall. Clara stopped in her tracks. You heard me. This house hears everything, he said. You'll learn that soon enough. Her blood ran cold. I think I should leave, she said suddenly. His eyes flicked toward her, ice cold, unreadable. In this storm? He asked. You'd never make it 5 feet. She didn't answer. He smiled softly and added, Don't worry, Clara, you're safe here. I promise, just rest. But the way he said it, it didn't feel like comfort. It felt like a trap closing. The storm outside raged for 2 more days. That's what Mr. Emery said. Anyway, time in the cabin didn't move normally. The windows remained shuttered, blocking out all light from outside. No clocks ticked, no radios played. There was no cell signal, not even a landline. Clara began to feel as if the world outside the cabin had been swallowed, like maybe it no longer existed at all. Only this strange, warm pocket of silence remained, where nothing changed, and the man who rescued her never seemed to sleep. She barely saw him eat. He was always awake, always watching quietly, always smiling but never laughing, not once. The longer Clara stayed, the more the warmth of the fire began to feel like a trap rather than safety. She slept on the couch at night, but the dreams that came were disturbing. In them, she wandered the woods in endless white, calling for help, only to hear her own name echo back at her in her own voice. By the 3rd morning, she woke with sweat on her forehead and a weight on her chest that had nothing to do with her injury. She needed answers. Her gut screamed that something about Emery and this cabin was deeply wrong. The house listened that morning, while Emery chopped firewood outside, his figure visible only briefly through a slit in the curtain. Clara searched. The cabin was bigger than she realized. The main room opened into the small kitchen, and from there, a side hallway bent into a second part of the house she hadn't seen yet. The floorboards groaned faintly beneath her feet, as if warning her not to go farther. But she did. She found a small office, dustier than the rest of the cabin. A typewriter sat unused on a desk beneath a window crusted with ice. Bookshelves lined the walls, but all the spines were blank, every single one. Dozens of journals with no titles, no author names, just leather-bound and silent. One was open on the desk. Inside were names, lists of them, all female, all first names, all written in the same careful, looping handwriting. At the top of the list, Clara read, Emily, Judith, Samantha, Hazel. Then, Clara Whitmore. She froze. Her name was the last one, written just days earlier. She slammed the book shut and backed away, her breath catching in her throat. Just then, she heard something behind her, a soft, creaking breath. She turned. Nothing, except the books were vibrating ever so slightly, like something behind the wall was shifting, listening, alive. The photograph she heard pounding. She moved quickly back to the main room, but something caught her eye in the hallway. A small linen closet was slightly ajar. She pushed it open, expecting towels or maybe canned goods, but instead, she found a box. Inside were photographs, black and white, curled at the edges, most of them torn or scratched. Every photo showed a girl, different ages, different clothes, but always the same setting, the cabin, standing outside the front door, or seated in the same chair where Clara had taken her soup the first night. All of their faces were ruined, either burned, scratched out, or scribbled over with pen until unrecognizable. She pulled one out from the middle, a girl who looked 12. Freckles, wide smile. The outline of her face had been cut out entirely. Another photo showed 2 figures, standing together. One was definitely Mr. Emery. The second girl looked eerily like Clara herself, but wearing clothes she didn't own. Her eyes had been gouged with a knife. Clara dropped the box, her hands trembling. She heard a door creak. Not from the front room, not from outside, from down the hall. The locked door. Clara stepped softly toward it. The heavy, bolted door Mr. Emery told her never to open. Only now, the lock looked undone. as if it had been left that way intentionally. She placed her hand on the knob. Cold metal biting her skin. She turned it slowly. Inside, the air changed instantly. It was cold, far colder than the rest of the cabin. The room was small, windowless, lit only by a single dim bulb overhead that flickered slightly as it warmed. The walls were covered in drawings, childlike sketches, stick figures in red crayon. One showed a girl falling into the snow. Another showed a large man standing behind her. One had a cabin with smoke coming from the chimney, and something black in the window, drawn like a smudge. Clara's eyes landed on the far wall. There was a mirror, tall and cracked, standing in the corner. Etched along the edge of the frame were names, the same ones from the journal. Each one had been scratched in by hand. She approached it slowly. Her reflection was faint, distorted. Her breath fogged the glass. Then she saw movement behind her, but when she turned no one was there. She looked back at the mirror. This time, her reflection wasn't alone. Standing beside her was a young girl, barely older than 10, pale, eyes wide. Her lips moved silently. Clara spun in place again. Empty room. But when she turned back, the girl in the mirror pressed her hand against the glass. Her lips moved again. Don't trust him. The return. Clara backed out of the room in horror and slammed the door shut behind her. Her breath ragged, she turned the lock back in place. Footsteps approached from behind her, heavy, measured. Emery stood at the end of the hall, holding 2 mugs of tea. I told you not to open that door, he said softly. His tone didn't rise, but there was something coiled behind his words now, something barely hidden. I was looking for the bathroom, Clara lied. He stared at her for a long time, then extended a mug. Accidents happen, he said. Drink something. You look shaken. Clara took the mug but didn't drink. Her eyes never left his, because now she was sure of one thing. This man was not who he seemed, and this cabin was not just a house. It was a cage. That night, the fire burned low. The flames flickered weakly, casting long shadows across the walls like stretching fingers. Clara sat curled on the couch beneath the heavy wool blanket, gripping the edge tightly with both hands, her heart pounding like war drums in her chest. She hadn't told Emery what she saw behind the locked door. She hadn't told him about the mirror, or the girl in it. She didn't need to. He knew. Something had shifted between them after she opened that door. He hadn't scolded her or raised his voice, but a tension had crept into the air, thick and invisible, like smoke you couldn't see but could smell. He watched her now more carefully, less like a caretaker and more like a warden. That night, she pretended to sleep. She kept her breathing slow and her eyes closed, lying perfectly still. From the next room, she heard Emery moving, not loudly, just small creaks of the floorboards, the faint click of a drawer opening, the scrape of a chair. But he didn't go to bed. He never did. She waited. Hours passed. The storm howled outside, and then it began again. The whispers returned at first. Clara thought it was her imagination. The wind had been playing tricks on her since the beginning. But then, it grew louder, more distinct. Voices. Not Emery's voice, not her own. Different ones, female, young, dozens, faint, overlapping, echoing through the cabin. At first, it sounded like murmuring from behind the walls. Then her name rose above the rest. Clara, Clara. She sat upright, her throat tight with fear. Her breath fogged the air even though the fire still burned. The voices came from everywhere, from inside the walls, beneath the floorboards, behind the stone fireplace, soft and distant, but pleading. He lies. Don't drink. You're not the first. Run. He's not Emery. Her skin crawled. She slipped off the couch and moved silently toward the hallway. Every shadow seemed to reach for her. She stepped over the squeaky board near the kitchen, something she had memorized in the last 2 days. Slowly, she inched toward the locked room again, but this time, something new happened. As she passed the hallway wall, she saw something movement, not in the room, inside the wall itself. The wooden slats flexed just slightly as if someone were pressing their hand from the other side. Clara stopped, heart racing. Another whisper came, but this time, it was clear and close, directly in her ear. He took us. She stumbled back from the wall, nearly falling. Her hand gripped the edge of a small table for balance. A candle toppled and hit the floor with a dull thud. She froze. From the far end of the cabin, a voice called out, Clara. Emery, awake. Alert, she ducked into the shadows by the side room and held her breath. She heard his steps slow, deliberate. He passed by, his shadow stretching across the walls like a tall, bent tree. He paused, looked toward the hallway. She didn't move. He waited, then, slowly, turned and walked away. Clara exhaled only when the floorboards stopped creaking. The girl, beneath the house back in the main room. Clara waited for the quiet to settle again. She didn't return to the couch. Instead, she went toward the trapdoor she had spotted earlier in the corner of the kitchen, half concealed beneath a rug she'd seen Emery bring firewood up from it. It led to the cellar. She lifted it slowly. The hinges groaned, but not loudly. A burst of cold, wet air rushed up from the darkness below. She descended the wooden stairs carefully. Each creaked, but she moved like a cat, 1 foot at a time. The cellar was lit only by moonlight spilling through a crack in the outer foundation. Shelves lined the walls filled with jars of preserves, old tools, and dusty boots. But in the back corner, she saw something that didn't belong. A small blanket, neatly folded on the floor. A doll beside it. It was a bed, or had been. Someone had stayed here, someone small. She stepped closer and noticed scratch marks on the stone wall nearby. Tally marks. Dozens, maybe hundreds, carved into the surface with something sharp, and next to them, etched in a child's uneven hand, "I want to go home. Let me go." Clara's breath hitched. Another whisper floated through the cold cellar. "We all came to the fire." She turned again. No one there. But the shadows in the corner twisted strangely, almost like they were watching her. Then a knock. From above. The trapdoor creaked slightly. He was looking for her. The other side of him. Or Clara climbed back up the stairs and slipped through the kitchen as quietly as possible. Moving into the hallway, the trapdoor creaked louder on the way up. Loud. Emery's footsteps thundered toward her. She turned the corner and there he was, blocking the hall. His face looked calm but his hands were clenched into tight fists. "I told you," he said quietly. "There are places in this house you don't belong." Clara opened her mouth, but he stepped forward. "I give you warmth. I give you food. I pulled you from the snow, and still you don't listen." His voice was still low, but there was something beneath it now, a buzz, almost like static, like something else inside him was starting to come through. "You're not the first, are you?" she whispered. That stopped him. He blinked once, then smiled. "I don't remember the first," he said. "Only the fire, only the cold." For a moment, his eyes changed, not visibly but subtly. The kindness in them blinked out like a dying light bulb. Something else peered out. Something that didn't understand warmth or people or time. Something older than snow. "You should rest," he said after a long silence. But it wasn't a suggestion. It was a command. The Messageeth at night. Clara did not sleep. She stared into the flames, wide-eyed, her mind spinning. She now knew Emery was not just a man, or at least not anymore. Something lived inside him, or wore his body, or perhaps he had become the thing that lived in this house. But more terrifying than what he was the thought that he might not be alone. The whispers in the walls, the faces in the mirror, the girl in the cellar. The house remembered every girl who came here, and now Clara was one of them. The next morning brought no sunlight, just gray light leaking through the shutter cracks and the same endless hush of snow outside. Clara lay stiff on the couch, still wrapped in the wool blanket. She hadn't slept, couldn't. Every creaking, the floorboards, every gust of wind outside felt like a warning. Mr. Emery had vanished into the back of the cabin hours earlier. She heard him moving behind walls, as if there were hidden passageways or secret rooms beyond her reach. That was the difference between them. He belonged to the house, but now she had to make a choice. Wait until he decided what to do with her, or find the truth first. She chose the second. A hollow book, a hidden quiche. Started by searching the library again. The blank-spined books still lined the walls like silent witnesses. One shelf sat lower than the others, cluttered with old novels, dust-covered paperbacks, and journals. Clara reached out, brushing her fingers along the rows. One book wobbled. She pulled it free. It was heavy, but when she opened it she found its insides were carved out. A hollowed compartment, and inside, a key. Brass, cold, heavy. There was a tag on a string tied to it, for what should never be remembered. Her heart thudded. The key was old but polished, like it had been used more than once. She stared at it for a long moment, then quietly tucked it into her coat pocket. The door behind the door. There were 3 rooms Clara had seen, but hadn't explored deeply. The kitchen pantry, the bathroom, and a strange wooden closet near the front door. That closet had always been locked tight, but now she had a key. She waited until the house was quiet. Emery's shadow hadn't passed the kitchen doorway in nearly an hour and crept forward. The key turned smoothly in the lock. The door opened, not to a closet, not even to a storage space, but to a narrow stairwell, winding downward, deeper than the cellar, made of stone instead of wood. Cold air breathed up from below, not the crisp cold of outside but damp, ancient cold, like something that had never seen light. She gripped the railing and descended slowly, step by step. The further she went, the quieter the world became. No wind, no storm, just the sound of her breath and the pounding of her heart. The hidden room at the bottom of the stairs. Clara found a chamber. It wasn't large, just a square stone room with a low ceiling. One electric bulb swayed from above, casting a faint yellow glow. But it was what was inside the room that made Clara stop cold. Dozens of clippings covered the walls, newspaper articles, printed photographs, scribbled notes. Every one of them was about missing girls. Local teen disappears on way home from school. Search called off. 13-year-old vanishes in winter storm. No trace of campground girl found after 5 years. Some were decades old, others more recent. She spotted names she recognized from the journal, from the wall beside the mirror, and then her own name. Clara Whitmore, 14. Last seen leaving school grounds. Her mouth went dry. The article was dated 3 days from now. He'd already prepared her disappearance. He'd already written her out of the world. She staggered back, bumping into a filing cabinet. It opened slightly from the pressure. Inside were folders, each one labeled with a name, each containing a photograph, a drawing, a short summary of arrival, and note titled Assimilation. Outcome most ended in the same words, failed. Clara reached for her folder. Inside was her photo taken from a distance. She was walking out of school, hood up, backpack slung over one shoulder. She had no idea it had ever been taken. The note inside her file said, 5th night she'll hear them, 6th night she'll see them, 7th night she joins. She was on night 5. The radio of the dead in the center of the room was a radio, old-fashioned, the kind with large dials and wood paneling. It hummed faintly even though no one had turned it on. Clara leaned closer. She turned the knob. No stations came in, no music, just static. Then suddenly a voice. Is anyone there? Please. Clara froze. The voice crackled and faded. Another replaced it. He keeps us cold. He feeds on forgetting. Then another. If you stay, you'll vanish like we did. Dozens of voices, all whispering, all trying to speak at once, as if this radio was some kind of bridge. Not to the outside world, but to the ones who never escaped. She reached to turn it off, but a final voice, barely audible, stopped her. Mom. Clara's blood ran cold. That voice. It was hers. A footstep above it in a creak. From above, footsteps, heavy, measured. Emery was in the main room again. Clara grabbed her folder, folded the newspaper article with her name on it, and stuffed them into her pocket. Then she turned off the light and crept back up the stairs. As quietly as she could, she paused halfway up, listening. The footsteps were pacing, back and forth. Then they stopped right in front of the closet door. She stopped breathing. The silence stretched so long, she thought she might go mad. Then, the footsteps moved away. She waited 10 more seconds before emerging and gently closing the door behind her. She made it back to the couch and threw the blanket over herself just as Emery appeared from the kitchen. He held 2 mugs. Soup again, he said. This storm isn't letting up. Clara smiled faintly, trying not to let her hands shake. Thanks, she said. He stared at her. Something in his eyes told her he knew. Maybe not everything, but something. And now they were playing a game, one where both pretended to be people they weren't. He, the kind caretaker, she, the grateful survivor. But the truth had been unearthed, and now, it was only a matter of time before the house swallowed her whole, or she burned it to the ground. By now, Clara knew she couldn't wait any longer. Something in the house had begun to shift, subtle at first, like a change in the air pressure, or a sour note in the wood smoke. Emery was watching her more. The fire burned lower than before. She hadn't seen food come from the kitchen in nearly a day. Even more chilling, the voices had gone quiet. No whispers behind the walls. No breathing near the locked door. No girls in mirrors. Just silence. As if the house was waiting, or worse, as if it knew she was planning to leave, and had gone still to listen better. Marking a way out, Clara spent the morning preparing. She found a rusted camping pack in the back of the library, and filled it with whatever she could. A small flashlight, matches, a metal thermos, 2 half-empty jars of pickled vegetables, and the folded newspaper clipping with her name on it. At the very bottom, she packed the journal of names, ripped from its binding, and most important of all, the brass key. The snow still screamed outside the shuttered windows. She didn't know how deep it was now, or how far she'd get, but she knew one thing. If she didn't try, she would never leave, and neither would the others. The distraction that afternoon. She waited until Emery left through the back door, carrying a bundle of firewood. He always went alone, always came back with dry wood, even though it had snowed for days. He wasn't gathering wood. He was feeding something, or speaking to something. That gave her 10 minutes, maybe less. She rushed to the hallway and approached the locked room again, the one with the mirror and the carvings. She used the brass key again. It opened without a sound. This time, she stepped inside and spoke aloud. "Please, I'm trying to leave. Help me. If you're real, help me." The air in the room changed instantly. The mirror didn't fog, but something moved behind the glass. The girl appeared again, pale, thin, trembling. Her face was gaunt now, like a candle burned too long. Clara stared. "What is he?" The girl pressed her hand against the inside of the mirror. Her mouth moved soundlessly, but the words echoed faintly in Clara's head. "He's not a man. He's what's left when men forget who they are." Clara swallowed. "How do I stop him?" The girl hesitated, then whispered, "Burn what's beneath," and vanished. Clara turned, locked the door, and bolted to the front entrance. The open door, the front door, was always locked, but Clara had seen where he kept the spare key in a hollow knot in the log wall. She retrieved it, slipped it into the lock, and the door opened. For a second, she hesitated. Snow whipped across the porch in violent swirls. Trees bowed under the weight of frost. It was nearly whiteout conditions, but Clara stepped forward anyway. She closed the door quietly behind her, tightened the straps on the pack, and took her first steps into the snow. Her feet sank nearly to her knees. The cold stabbed through her clothes like glass. But she was moving, finally moving. She didn't know which direction to go, so she followed her instincts away from the smoke, down the slope into the thickets. Behind her, the cabin watched. The forest isn't empty. Clara made it half a mile before the cold began to claw at her lungs. She moved tree to tree, hiding under branches, shielding herself from the wind. Then she heard it. Not footsteps, not wind, a voice her own. "Clara, come back. You'll freeze. You'll die out here." She turned. Nothing. Then again. "Clara," from ahead this time. The woods were mimicking her. She remembered the journal. "Sixth night she'll see them." Shapes formed in the mist, figures moving through the trees, walking between snowdrifts, watching her with hollow eyes. Some had no mouths. Some wore coats like hers. She kept going. She didn't speak. If she responded, she feared her own voice might not come back as hers. The true Fasesh reached a clearing, a wide open space, where a frozen pond had cracked beneath heavy snow. Beyond it, the woods opened into a slope, a trail, a possible road. She began crossing and then heard footsteps behind her. Not echoes, not ghosts. Boots. She turned. Emery, only he didn't look like Emery anymore. His face was longer, thinner. His eyes were sunken, black-rimmed. His mouth curved strangely, like it had forgotten how to smile correctly. And the skin on his neck, it shifted, like cloth draped over something else entirely. "You shouldn't have left," he said quietly. "I know what you are," Clara said, standing her ground. "You feed on them, on us, on the ones who vanish." He tilted his head. "Is that what you think?" She pulled the thermos from her bag and poured a line of kerosene along the snow. He stepped forward. She lit a match and threw it down. Fire roared to life, creating a brief wall between them. Emery didn't flinch, but he didn't cross. He simply smiled wider now. "Teeth too many, too even. You're not the first to try," he whispered. "But this forest always brings you back." The return. Clara didn't wait. She bolted across the ice, slipping and scrambling toward the trail. The woods behind her howled louder than before, trees groaning like they were alive. She ran until her lungs gave out, until her legs threatened to buckle, until she saw it, a small mailbox, leaning sideways, half buried in snow. Birch Hollow. The cabin burns back at the house. The fire Clara had started crept across the clearing and reached the foundation of the cabin. The dry logs caught instantly. Smoke began to rise. Inside, behind the hidden room and the mirror and the cellar full of names, something screamed. Not with pain, but with rage. The house, for the first time in decades, was being erased. The final whispers. Clara approached a distant house, one with lights on, one that looked warm. She heard one final whisper, not behind her, not in her head, but beside her, a girl's voice, familiar. "Thank you." Clara turned, but no one was there. Just snow and a long path home. By the time Clara reached the edge of town, her legs were barely holding her up. The storm had eased, just slightly, but it left behind a frozen, ghost-white landscape that stretched across every rooftop, field, and treetop. The sky was the dull gray of wet stone. Her boots were soaked through, her fingers cracked and bleeding. And yet she was alive. She had escaped. She crossed the snow-covered road leading into the quiet town of Birch Hollow, where old gas lamps lined the streets, and nearly every building had frost crusting the windows. There were no people at first, just stillness. Then a door opened. The first face as an older man stepped out of the corner store. He wore a flannel jacket and had a beard gone mostly white. When he saw Clara, he stopped cold. She must have looked like a ghost, thin, bruised, dirt-smeared, and barely standing. Her eyes were wide, her lips blue. But instead of rushing to her, he just whispered, "Another one." Clara swayed. "What?" He came closer, slowly, like approaching a scared animal. "You made it out," he said. "Didn't think anyone would again." Others began to emerge. A woman from a bakery, wiping her hands on a flour-dusted apron, a teenager in snow boots, an older couple wrapped in scarves. They gathered around Clara. No one asked what happened. They knew. The one they all knew. Clara was brought inside the diner, a small building at the center of town with red leather booths and a wood-burning stove that popped loudly in the corner. She was given soup, tea, dry socks, a thick quilt. A woman named June sat beside her, brushing Clara's frozen hair from her face. "I don't understand," Clara whispered. "You all knew about him?" June glanced at the others, then nodded. "We don't talk about it. But yes, you let him stay out there." June looked older now, tired. "We didn't let him stay. We just stopped going past the ridge and warned our kids not to wander." Clara stared at her. "You mean you left him there after he took girls?" June's hands trembled. "We tried to stop it. Years ago, sheriff brought a search party. Cabin burned once before. But no matter what we did, the woods brought it back. Him back." Clara's heart twisted. "You knew he was taking them." "We didn't know how many," June said, her voice cracking. "Not until the dream started. Not until we heard them whispering at night. The town, that forgotten of the men, Gus." The storekeeper poured Clara more tea and added, "He was a ranger. Long time ago. Good man. First year up there. He found a lost hiker. Brought him back alive. Then a girl. Then a dog. He always came back." Gus paused. "Until he didn't." Clara listened. "There was a fire," he continued. "His daughter died in it, Emily. After that, he went off the map. The house changed. He changed." June nodded. "And then girls started vanishing. They all went quiet." "The fire crackled," Clara whispered. "Why didn't you burn the place down for good?" A long silence. Then a voice from the booth behind her. "Because fire doesn't kill what doesn't belong to this world." The journal on the table. Clara pulled the journal of names from her pack and set it on the table. Dozens of women leaned in to read it. Some gasped. Others covered their mouths. One name caught a woman's. "Eileen O'Rourke. My sister," she whispered. Choking on her tears, "She disappeared 20 years ago. Nobody ever believed she ran away." Clara turned the pages slowly. More names were recognized. Some from Birch Hollow, some from neighboring towns. Some no one had even known were gone. The town hadn't just forgotten. The house had made them forget. The map to the forgotten, a man named Caleb brought in a map. He had worked as a volunteer firefighter and kept old trail maps from before the region was reforested. They marked the burned cabin's location and what lay underneath it. There was something buried there before the cabin was even built. Caleb said, a holding site, a collapsed mine. Legend said it was cursed ground. June shook her head. "Not cursed, fed," Clara asked. June leaned closer. "Whatever took Emery's soul, if it was ever his to begin with, feeds on what's lost. Girls with no names, girls who vanish. The house is just to the mouth." Clara clenched her fists. "I saw it. The files, the mirror. It was alive." She told them everything. The cellar, the voices, the girl in the glass, the whisper that told her to burn what was beneath. "They want her gone that night." The mayor came to the diner, not to comfort her but to silence her. He was polite, in that sharp, rehearsed way politicians are when trying to control a situation. "You've been through a lot, Clara," he said. "The best thing for you now is rest. No need to stir up old grief. The past doesn't need digging." She stared at him. "You want me to forget?" "We all forget," he replied. "It's how Birch Hollow survives." But Clara didn't nod. She didn't cry. She just stood up and said, "Then I'll remind everyone for you." A signal sent at dawn. Clara used the only working landline in the town library and called the state police. She told them everything. The names, the location, the journals, the cabin. The others still trapped in that place between places. I have proof, she said. They promised to send investigators. She knew what that meant. They didn't believe her. But someone had to try. The fire hadn't finished. Later that night, Clara stood at the edge of Birch Hollow's town line, where the trees began again. She thought about going back, with fire, with others, but the wind was different now, colder, still, and as she stared into the tree line, she saw smoke, not rising, curling downward, as if the forest itself was inhaling, and somewhere, deep in the dark, a door creaked open again. The state troopers came 2 days later, 2 SUVs, 1 helicopter overhead, dogs in crates and long guns strapped to their backs. Their arrival shattered the quiet of Birch Hollow. Like glass dropped in a library, Clara stood with June and Caleb at the trailhead, watching them unload. Captain Rourke was in charge, tall, buzzed hair, skeptical eyes. He looked Clara up and down like she was a question with no answer. You said you walked 30 miles in that storm, alone, he said. I had help, Clara replied. He frowned. But no one else came back with you. She said nothing. The trail opens again. It had been nearly a week since she escaped the cabin. Now the woods looked different, brighter, calmer. The blizzard had passed and the pines swayed gently under soft wind. But Clara could feel it the second her boots crossed the tree line. The tension was still there, just buried again. The forest wasn't healed. It was hiding. Rourke and his team followed her as she retraced her steps. She wore snowshoes now, better gear. But still, she could feel the house pulling at the edges of her memory, making the path feel longer, wronger. Where exactly is this cabin? Rourke asked as they approached the ridge. It finds you, Clara said. He raised an eyebrow. But, an hour later they saw it. The cabin still stood how Clara had watched it burn. The cabin stood again. Whole. No scorch marks. No ash. Just like before. Windows shuttered, smoke rising gently from the chimney. It looked inviting, peaceful. Rourke's men slowed. Some glanced at each other. I don't like this, one whispered. They approached carefully. One officer tried. The door. Unlocked. Inside, the fire crackled. Soup boiled on the stove. And seated at the table, looking exactly as Clara remembered Mr. Emery. The man who shouldn't babe you this time. He didn't smile. He didn't offer tea. He just looked at Clara. And then at Rourke. You shouldn't have come, he said simply. Rourke stepped forward. You're under arrest. Get on your knees. Emery didn't move. Rourke grabbed his wrist, and then screamed. He collapsed to the ground, convulsing violently. His mouth opened in a silent yell, eyes rolling back. The other troopers drew their weapons, but Emery never moved. Clara ran to Rourke's side. He was still breathing, but unconscious, cold, like something had been taken from him. The house turned sand, then the house changed. The lights dimmed, the walls groaned as if the wood were breathing in. Photographs appeared on the mantel that hadn't been there seconds ago. Photos of the troopers, standing outside the cabin, then sitting at the table, then laying in the snow, each one distorted, already decaying. We need to go, Clara said. One trooper stepped toward the door, but it slammed shut. They were inside. Now. Like flies caught in a web. Emery stood, his face twisted, not angry, not smug, just hollow. You don't understand, he said quietly. I am not the fire. I am the thing it tried to burn away. The cellar below. Clara remembered what the girl in the mirror told her. Burn what's beneath. She broke away from the others and ran to the back room. The trapdoor in the kitchen still led down into the cold. She yanked it open and descended into the cellar. This time, it was different. The walls were lined with mirrors, dozens, and in each one a face. Girls, dozens of them, staring, watching. As she walked, their mouths moved in unison. You're almost there. At the far end, a hole had opened in the wall. It hadn't been there before. It led deeper into rock, into earth. She climbed through. The chamber of names tunnel opened into a stone chamber. The walls were covered in names, carved into the rock by hand. Thousands of them. Some were written over others, some were scratched out. But all belonged to the missing. At the center stood a fire pit, unlit, and above it, hanging from chains, a mirror. She approached it. Inside, she saw herself, but standing behind her the other Clara, the one from the mirror, her face pale, her eyes dark with knowing. Clara turned, but the chamber was empty. The reflection spoke. You must finish it. The names, they keep him alive. Clara looked at the walls. If the names fed him, then removing them might starve him. She grabbed a rock and began smashing. Above, Chouse upstairs. The troopers were under siege. The cabin was closing in. Doors wouldn't open. Lights burst. Flames jumped from the fireplace onto the ceiling. Emery stood still in the center of it, all arms out, as if inviting the house to consume him. And it did. Smoke poured from the walls. Blood leaked from the gaps between floorboards. Screams echoed, not human, but not animal either. One trooper tried the window. It showed only forest, stretching endlessly, with no people, no roads, no sun. Another aimed a rifle at Emery. He smiled, and his face split vertically, like cracked porcelain. Inside, fire. Below, the final light. Clara kept smashing names. Each one destroyed made the chamber shake. The fire pit flared. The mirror cracked. And behind her, something began to crawl from the dark. A shape, long, thin, hunched. It looked like Emery but without skin, without limits. A creature of memory, stitched together by every lost girl. Stop, it hissed. They belong to me. Clara didn't stop. She struck the mirror with the rock. Hard. It shattered. Light burst from the fragments. The creature screamed and dissolved, as if smoke being sucked into a storm drain. The names on the walls burned away. And then, silence. The cabin collapses. The entire house groaned as if in agony. Beams cracked. Glass exploded. Clara ran back through the tunnel, through the cellar. She burst into the kitchen just as the roof began to fall. She grabbed Rourke by the jacket and dragged him to the door, now unlocked. Outside, the snow was falling lightly. The house behind her folded in on itself, like a dying lung. And then it was gone. No ash. No smoke. Just a clearing. The forest breathes back in Birch Hollow. Clara sat beside Rourke as he woke up in the town's clinic. He remembered nothing. Just cold, and a mirror, and the sound of voices he couldn't see. But he believed her now. So did the world. Because once the house died, the names came back. Hundreds of missing persons files across the state were reopened. Bodies were recovered. Parents remembered daughters they had somehow forgotten. And Clara knew the forest was still dangerous, but it no longer whispered. The fire was out, for now. It had been 37 days since Clara walked out of the forest. 37 days since the cabin burned itself out of existence. Since Emery or the thing wearing his skin disintegrated into smoke and ash and silence. Since the names carved into cold stone were set free. But for Clara, it hadn't really ended. She was home now, sort of. Placed with a temporary foster family in a warm house with thick carpets, safe walls, and working locks. The woman who cared for her was kind. The food was good. The air was warm. And yet she didn't sleep, not like before, because the dreams still came. Dreams of the lost girls came to her in sleep, not to haunt but to speak, not cries for help, not screams. Thanks. Each one stepped from the mist, smiled faintly, and vanished. Some reached for her hand, some simply nodded. She remembered all their names. She had memorized them. Lena, Alina, Kay, June, Mercy, Eloise. Some had walked into the woods for shelter and never returned. Some were dragged there by hands no one else saw. Some had tried to fight. All had been forgotten until her. She had done more than survive. She had remembered the girl from the Mirror night. She dreamed of the mirror again. But this time, she stood outside it. And the girl inside was her, a past version of Clara. Wide-eyed, frightened. You pulled me out, the girl said softly. Clara reached forward and this time, the glass didn't stop her. She touched her own reflection and watched the younger Clara dissolve into mist. Then she woke and knew it was time to go back. Not to the house, not to the woods. But to the truth. The book of unforgotten names. With the help of Caleb and June, who had both become quiet allies in Birch Hollow, Clara compiled a full list of every name. From the journal and the stone walls, they cross-referenced them with missing persons databases, cold case files, and even old local legends. The final number, 216 names. Some were already known to police. Some had never been reported at all. But Clara remembered everyone. She created what she called the Book of the Unforgotten. Not for a museum, not for publicity, for the families. One by one, they reached out. Some came in tears. Some just wanted a place to leave flowers. And through it all, Clara never once claimed she was a hero. She always said the same thing. They saved me first. The authorities step in, too late. When the state investigators returned to the clearing, they found nothing. No debris, no foundation, no sign a house had ever stood there. Just a circle of frost-burned ground. Still, Clara's story and the revived missing person file spread. A national outlet picked it up. Teen girl escapes forest after days in snow. Uncovers forgotten victims. Some believed her. Others said she hallucinated, that her trauma had invented the story. But it didn't matter, because the families believed, and the girls who had vanished, they stopped whispering. Because they were finally seen. The whisper network. Something New began in Birch Hollow, quiet, but real. Girls started coming forward, not from the house, but from towns nearby. Towns like Birch Hollow, towns with their own Emerys, their own quiet shadows no one dared name. Clara wrote letters to them, shared names, shared stories, helped them remember that sometimes forgetting wasn't protection. It was a weapon used against them. They called themselves the Whisper Network. It wasn't official, it wasn't organized, but it was growing. And Clara, she was their signal fire. One last walk in afternoon, Clara asked June to take her back up the mountain, not to the clearing, to the tree line, just far enough to look. They stood at the ridge where the snow began again, where silence still lived. But it was different now. The air didn't hum, the trees didn't lean in, the wind didn't whisper in strange tongues. Still, Clara stared. A long time. June asked, "Do you think it's really gone?" Clara didn't answer right away. Then she said, "I think it's sleeping." And they walked back down together. The girl in the photograph. The weeks later, Clara received a letter in the mail. No return address, no stamp, just her name. Inside was a photograph. Grainy, black and white. A girl standing at the edge of a forest. Not Clara, but familiar. She flipped the photo over. One word: Emily, Emery's daughter, the one who had burned, the one who was supposed to be the beginning of it all. And beneath the name, something scribbled faintly. It didn't start with him, it only wore him. Legacy of the Foreclara knew what that meant. This thing, the thing in the cabin, in the mirror, in the floorboards. It wasn't born from grief. It had only used grief to anchor itself. It had no shape. No gender, just a hunger for forgetting. But now, something had changed. It had been remembered. Named. Burned. That gave Clara hope, because now, when something went missing, people checked, asked, investigated. They didn't just move on, or let it slide. Because one girl, cold, alone, and desperate, had walked 30 miles in the snow, and made the world remember. The final whisper in her 15th birthday. Clara stood by her bedroom window outside. Snow was falling gently. For a moment, she thought she heard something. Not a scream, not a voice, just a hum, like wind between trees. She closed her eyes and whispered back, "I hear you." Then silence, not cold. Not empty. Just peaceful.